Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can I kindly ask you to take your seats so that we can start the afternoon session? So, welcome to all of you to this afternoon session on Finance for Growth. This conference, organized by the Italian presidency of the European Union, of course with great support of the European Commission, to which my personal gratitude is now directed. This final session will deal with the policy responses and the way forward after a very interesting morning. I've been reported very carefully and briefed very carefully, a very interesting discussion this morning on specific aspects of how finance can help restore growth and jobs in Europe. We have an outstanding panel of policymakers that know Europe very well and I'm sure will bring an additional value to this conference, offering not just specific insights but their political vision. And let me introduce them. Roberto Gualtieri, member of the European Parliament and chair of the Econ Committee. Jeroen Dijsselbloem, chairman of the Eurogroup and Minister of Finance of the Netherlands. Michel Sapin, Minister of Finance of France, and Mateusz Surek, Minister of Finance of Poland. Mateusz, apologies for my bad Polish. So, without further ado, I'd like to start, but also to recap a few of the issues that were raised in the morning session so that they may be of some help to the introductory remarks by our panelists. First of all, there is one big question about the role that finance can play in restoring growth. Is it because we don't have enough finance, or is it because we don't have enough profitable projects to be financed? My approach is that we need both, of course, and we need to find a solution to this two-variable equation at the highest possible level. Second point that is related is, of course, banks play a key role in financing growth, especially in some parts of Europe. But maybe we need to have something additional with respect to bank lending, and we have to foster the development of non-banking instruments and institutions to provide resources to growth. Third question, in banking, of course, Europe now has gone to the establishment of a banking union, which is a remarkable structural change and has just completed the comprehensive assessment. So one question is, will this be enough to restore credit for growth in the foreseeable future, or do we need something else? And finally, how can we bring together banking union and capital markets union, having in mind, at least what I have in mind, is a basic principle that dates back to the beginning of the European construction, that at the end of the day, Europe has achieved more growth and jobs through more integration in different areas and fields, and still needs to do a lot. And so we may find other opportunities for integration in the financial and banking sectors, and through that achieve more growth. But I've taken too much time already. I'd like to give the floor to our guests, so I'd like to ask Roberto Gualtieri to introduce.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank Minister Padoan for the invitation to this conference on finance and growth. It is a very relevant and timely initiative. Since 2008, financial crisis started, we, the European Parliament, the Union institution, have been busy repairing a financial system that has become a burden for the economy and for taxpayers who have been and are showing their anger. We had to respond to a massive supervision failure in Europe, and the European Parliament has been championing the creation of genuine, strong financial supervision at European level. A historic landmark was yesterday's taking over by the ECB of the direct supervision of the 120 most significant banks in the euro area. This is revolutionary and probably the most important step in the economic integration after the introduction of the euro. I'm proud of what we have achieved collectively. So the repair works are on good track. But after the repairing, it is high time to look forward urgently. The autumn forecast has unveiled a naked truth, and I hope there is nobody in Europe who does not share the sense of urgency. We need a political response at the EU level, which should be rapid, bold, ambitious, and comprehensive. And finance for growth is a key ingredient of this response. How to make sure that finance is put at the service of a real economic recovery, and in particular, how to support and encourage the channeling of financial resources to long-term investment, which are the bridge between the demand of today and the supply of tomorrow, and where Europe is dramatically lagging behind other dynamic areas of the world. The first actor of this picture are banks. The comprehensive assessment has been a success and contributed to improve capitalization of our banking sector, which resulted in a capital shortfall under a potential severe adverse scenario of only 10 billion and below market expectations. This is good job, good news, but it is not sufficient, and here I see three issues to address. First, how to improve our methodology to price assets in banks' balance sheets in a way that does not discourage lending to economy vis-à-vis trading activity. Second, how we Europeans can contribute more actively and successfully to define global rules. Third, how to create better conditions in the current regulatory framework for banks to be able to transfer risk to market operators that are ready and better equipped to handle that risk in order to give banks more room for lending to economy. And of course, the idea of creating an ABS market in Europe is very important for this purpose. And this is very closely linked to the second actor of our picture, capital markets, and to quote Commissioner Hill's introduction, the goal to unlocking capital around the Union to support SMEs and long-term investments in line with the goals of EU 2020 strategy. First, we need to carefully verify whether the current regulatory framework for institutional investors can be fine-tuned in order to maximize their capacity to finance long-term investment. Second, we will actively engage with the Commission in the definition of the agenda for Capital Markets Union. We have to be pragmatic and to address immediately the more urgent needs, developing standards for high-quality securitization, ensuring common and reliable standards for cross-border information in SMEs, develop a European market for private placements. At the same time, the European Parliament, which is by its nature ambitious, will work on the design of a comprehensive capital market union based on a strong European supervision, a genuine single rule book, a recovery and resolution framework, while addressing sensitive issues like insolvency regimes. LTIF is a perfect example of how a well-functioning capital market union can contribute to bridging the investment gap in Europe. I can give good news here today. The negotiations with the Council are on a good track, and I'm confident that we will be able to reach a good outcome on the LTIF regulation before the end of the year. And now let me move to what I think is the third leg of an integrated approach of finance for growth, namely an EU investment policy. To fully mobilize private capitals for long-term investment, we need an ambitious EU investment plan. We need EU projects that are attractive for investors by their size and European scale. We need also a decisive public investment initiative at the EU level and the creation as a perspective at least, of a EU fund on strategic investment with a borrowing capacity. We look forward to the presentation of the Juncker plan, and we expect it to be commensurate to the challenges that we are facing. Finance for growth and the EU investment strategy, however, cannot work if we do not put in place a more comprehensive policy mix based on an accommodative monetary policy, structural reform, and a growth-friendly fiscal policy. I hope the next annual growth survey and the other measures that the Commission will adopt within the next week will form a kind of macroeconomic package which will overcome the pro-cyclical stance of the Eurozone fiscal policy of the last years. And I expect the incoming revision of the economic governance framework to fully address the need of better appropriately measure the cyclical component of the economic variables, the need of better encouraging structural reform, the need of an enhanced economic policy coordination, and also the need of correcting the existing bias against public investment while preserving fiscal responsibility. The European Parliament will actively contribute to this effort, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Roberto Jeroen. Now you have the floor.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to speak here. I'll try and be quite brief because I think it's interesting also to take questions from you. I think that at the start of the banking union, which was only 3 days ago, was it? I think was a very crucial point in the economic recovery for Europe. And I think, as Roberto said, the outcome was positive. Yet I also believe that we have to further strengthen our banks. As you know, a number of the quality standards that were used in this process were still different per country, and over the next 3-4 years, these differences will be phased out, and we will raise the bar for our banks, which is good, because I think we need strong banks, well capitalized, to finance the growth which is so desperately needed. Secondly, I strongly support the initiative that the new Commission will take on the Capital Markets Union. It's crucial for European companies, for European markets, to diversify the sources of financing. We are too dependent on the banking channel, and we need to make our economies more resilient to shocks. That will help boost investments, and I think it's one of the bigger projects that we should undertake at European level, following up on the banking union. Having said that, I do agree with Roberto that the 300 billion package which was announced by President Juncker is important, and we're all looking forward to his proposals in December. I think we all also realize that the possibility for public investments at the moment is quite limited. There are few countries that have the fiscal space to increase their public investments at the moment. One country, also the largest economy, has that possibility, and I hope that they will. But the possibilities for different countries are limited. And also for the European Commission to open up new budgets, the scope will be limited. I think we seriously have to look at the possibilities of the EIB to see what we can do to expand their possibilities. But my crucial point would be this, that we need private investment to return to the Eurozone and to Europe. Too many European companies which are still well capitalized and have come out of the crisis with quite a strong balance sheet are now investing outside Europe. And that is a crucial point, and we really have to work on an investment agenda which looks at the investment climate throughout Europe. How can we bring at least these European companies and these European pension funds to invest once again at a much larger scale in our economies? And that requires also structural reforms. It requires, of course, dealing with the banking union, dealing with capital market, but it also requires structural reforms which look at this investment climate in Europe. It has to improve. Different measures will have to be taken, looking at how governments function, how open markets are, what opportunities there are for investments. So I think there has to be a strong link between the different policy strands in our economic policy. There has to be a strong link between investments and structural reforms. Structural reforms have to open up possibilities for investment. There has to be a strong link between our fiscal approach and structural reforms and investments. When countries are ambitious in terms of structural reforms, they should be rewarded when the Commission assesses the budgetary plans. And within the budgetary plans, investment-friendly choices should be made and can be made, first of all by national governments, by making different choices than we've done over the last number of crisis years, making sure that the last thing we touch, and actually we should open up more fiscal space for public investments within our fiscal boundaries, within the limitations of our budget, by simply shifting towards investment expenditures. And there are lots of possibilities there. My final point would be the only way to really get growth going again in Europe is to connect these policy strands. Make sure that investments are supported by structural reforms, that our budgets open up more space for investments, and that the budgets and the reforms also enforce each other. Those countries that do reform should see the rewards of that in their budget, and the Commission should fully appreciate that in their assessments. If we connect the different strands of our policy mix, it can be much more effective than it has been over the last couple of years, and that, I think, is the ambition that we should show the couple of months coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeroen, also for expanding the scope of the conversation to bring in appropriately the structural reform agenda. Michel, à toi.
Merci infiniment, Pierre Carlo. J'ai comme caractéristique de ne pas parler la même langue, même si nous avons le latin en commun, Pierre Carlo, mais qui n'a pas forcément pénétré jusqu'au fond de la Pologne, encore que si. Merci donc d'avoir mis vos oreillettes si vous en aviez besoin. Pierre Carlo, c'est vraiment un très bon sujet. C'est typiquement ce que tu souhaitais porter au cours de la présidence italienne, de voir comment on peut encourager la croissance par une amélioration de ses financements. Il faut toujours partir de là, de la croissance, ou bien, pour le dire autrement, de la trop faible croissance. C'est ce que tu disais à juste titre, et les dernières prévisions de la Commission, je parle des prévisions en termes de croissance, sont évidemment pas réjouissantes, puisque ce sont des prévisions qui seront vues à la baisse, que ce soit pour 2014 ou que ce soit pour 2015. Donc la seule question que nous devons nous poser, c'est quels sont les bons outils pour faire en sorte que cette croissance soit plus forte, qu'elle soit stable. Il ne s'agit pas de créer un feu de joie pendant quelques semaines ou quelques mois. Il faut vraiment faire en sorte que cette croissance soit aux profondeurs et qu'elle nous permette aussi d'améliorer notre croissance potentielle. Parce que si nous nous comparons de continent à continent, on s'aperçoit que cette croissance potentielle sur le vieux continent de l'Europe est en train de perdre de sa valeur et de sa vigueur. Et donc il faut aussi mettre en place ces outils de croissance potentielle. C'est pour ça que la question, bien sûr, de la politique monétaire, mais de sa transmission jusqu'au cœur de l'économie. Et là, il y a une question de transmission du financement et de la liquidité jusqu'au cœur de l'économie, que ce soit la question budgétaire, avoir le bon rythme qui permette à la fois de soutenir la croissance tout en continuant à nous permettre de rétablir nos équilibres budgétaires, les questions de structure, de réforme structurelle et les questions d'investissement sont vraiment les 4 sujets qui sont sur la table et auxquels il faut que nous donnions de la cohérence pour nous permettre d'avoir une politique efficace dans les mois qui viennent. Alors bien entendu, dès lors que l'on parle d'investissement, de croissance, on parle de financement. Et comme beaucoup d'autres avant moi, ou comme les 2 autres avant moi, je souhaiterais mettre l'accent sur cette question du financement et en particulier du financement privé. Je crois que tout le monde a en tête ce chiffre qui nous démontrait que dans la zone euro, le niveau des investissements, toutes confondues, publics et privés, entre 2007 et aujourd'hui, avait diminué, j'ai vu 2 chiffres, 16% ou 18%, disons que nous sommes dans le même ordre de grandeur. Donc l'investissement aujourd'hui est largement inférieur à ce qu'il était en 2007. Si on regarde les composantes de cet investissement, investissement public, investissement privé, on s'aperçoit à un grand pays près que cet investissement public est resté à un niveau qui est à peu près le même par rapport à 2007. Il a monté un petit peu en 2008-2009, quand il a fallu faire face à la crise financière, mais il est resté à peu près au même niveau. Et que ce qui a donc baissé, c'est évidemment l'investissement privé. D'où la nécessité absolue de remobiliser cet investissement privé au service de nos investissements d'une manière générale et de la croissance d'une manière plus particulière. Alors bien sûr, ce qui a été fait, décidé, en réponse aux grandes difficultés qui s'étaient manifestées en 2008-2009, je veux dire par là, et la supervision bancaire et la mise en place progressive de la résolution bancaire, l'union bancaire est une bonne réponse à ce qui était devenu une fragmentation de l'ensemble de nos économies, les banques étant en quelque sorte isolées chacune dans son pays avec des grandes difficultés, des grandes différences de modalités de financement d'un pays à l'autre qui étaient préjudiciables au bon développement de notre économie. Des décisions importantes ont été prises. Je pense qu'elles vont avoir un fruit très rapidement en permettant, par le canal bancaire, de mieux mobiliser qu'aujourd'hui de l'investissement privé. Mais chacun sait qu'on ne peut pas s'en rester uniquement au canal bancaire et que la caractéristique, là aussi, de notre continent, c'est que nous n'avons pas suffisamment accès directement, nos entreprises en particulier n'ont pas accès suffisamment directement aux marchés eux-mêmes et c'est bien entendu l'enjeu, y compris l'enjeu d'une réunion comme celle-ci. Comment peut-on mieux mobiliser directement les investissements au service de nos projets, que ce soit des projets d'infrastructures, parfois même d'infrastructures publiques, ou que ce soit des projets d'investissement strictement privés. Quelques sujets qui sont sur la table et sur lesquels il faut avancer. D'abord celui de la titrisation. À chaque fois, on est obligé, quand on parle de titrisation, de dire attention, pas celle qui a déstabilisé en partie l'économie mondiale, en partant des États-Unis et d'une titrisation immobilière qui a été particulièrement fragile, qui a créé des risques considérables et au-delà des risques qui sont avérés, une réalité déstabilisante. Donc une titrisation dite de qualité, transparente, qui permettent de savoir aux investisseurs exactement dans quoi ils mettent leur argent et dans quelles conditions ils prennent des risques. Ça, c'est un élément absolument décisif et qui nous oblige, au niveau de chacun de nos pays, comme au niveau de l'Europe tout entière, à mettre en œuvre ces véhicules, qui soient des véhicules transparents, sécurisés et à disposition du système bancaire et donc, au-delà du système bancaire, à disposition des entreprises elles-mêmes pour permettre de retrouver des modalités de financement. Il faut travailler aussi sur les questions de fonds européens de long terme. Il y a beaucoup de capitaux qui sont prêts à s'investir dans des investissements de long terme, y compris dans des investissements d'infrastructures. Et la France a une vieille tradition de relations publiques-privées dans ce domaine, autour des concessions, autour des délégations de services publics. Il en existe dans d'autres pays. J'ai l'honneur, ayant quelques années d'expérience derrière moi, d'avoir donné mon nom à une loi qui s'appelle la loi Sapin, non Sapin, elle s'appelle les Sapin, les Sapin, quel que soit le pays dans lequel on peut y faire référence, mais c'est au fond une réflexion et des actions, des outils juridiques qui permettent de mieux mêler l'investissement public et l'investissement privé, et l'investissement privé au service de grandes infrastructures ou de grands services publics. C'est là, je pense, aussi une nécessité, avec une meilleure harmonisation sur l'ensemble du territoire européen, pour permettre la mise en œuvre de ces outils qui sont des outils modernes et efficaces, qui ont montré leur efficacité, mais qui sont parfois très peu utilisés. Je pense en particulier à l'Allemagne, qui connaît mal ce type de méthode et qui s'interroge aujourd'hui sur les moyens de le mettre éventuellement en place, ces méthodes qui permettent de mobiliser de l'investissement privé au service d'infrastructures publiques. Je terminerai par ces quelques mots parce qu'au fond, nous sommes toujours à la croisée du public et du privé. Je le dis clairement, l'enjeu, c'est la mobilisation de l'investissement privé. L'enjeu, c'est de faire en sorte que les marchés de capitaux trouvent en Europe et pas seulement ailleurs des débouchés qui soient des débouchés à la fois rentables pour l'investisseur et qui soient rentables pour le pays, pour la société, pour l'économie elle-même. Mais il ne faut jamais opposer investissement privé et investissement public, parce qu'il y a parfois nécessité d'avoir un amorçage, d'avoir une capacité de faire levier à partir des investissements publics. Et donc, on doit toujours, même quand on veut développer l'investissement privé, se poser la question de la place demain de l'investissement public. Et c'est là que, bien entendu, nous en revenons à des considérations d'ordre budgétaire. Quel est le bon rythme de réduction de nos déficits qui permettent de préserver l'investissement public? Les économies doivent être faites sur le fonctionnement et pas sur l'investissement public, quelle que soit la collectivité concernée, qu'il s'agisse de l'Europe, qu'il s'agisse de chacune de nos nations, ou qu'il s'agisse aussi des collectivités locales à l'intérieur de chacune de nos nations, qui sont souvent porteurs très fortement de cet investissement public. Voilà l'équilibre sur lequel nous devons réfléchir, agir avec, je reprendrai le terme, une véritable urgence. La situation de croissance est inquiétante. Nous ne sommes pas dans la crise, mais nous sommes dans une situation de trop faible croissance, trop faible inflation, et si nous n'y remédions pas, ça risque d'être un tunnel trop long. J'ai une conviction, c'est que nous avons la connaissance de la situation. Nous avons ensemble le bon diagnostic et nous avons des outils qui sont des outils précis, concrets, qui peuvent nous permettre de réagir. C'est donc un risque, mais c'est un risque que nous pouvons surmonter pour nous permettre de retrouver une véritable croissance utile à la reconstruction de nos économies et souvent aussi de nos sociétés.
And to end this first round, merci Michel. To end this first round, Mateusz.
Thank you very much. Let me expand on some of the things that have been said here. I mean, starting with, are we facing a shortage of profitable investments or shortage of funding? I mean, first of all, I think there is well, there's definitely a shortage of profitable investments in the short run. And that is a natural reaction of low capacity utilization, of demand limits created by the leveraging in the private sector, housing sector problems in some countries. And this is something that we won't solve very quickly, certainly not with easier access to financing, not from current levels of interest rates anyway. What remains, if we agree, and we do agree that Europe does need more investment, is long-term investments which are conducive to development of Europe. And I'm talking here about infrastructure, social infrastructure, environmental. I mean, these investments are always needed, but there are sometimes there are more needed than in others, because today they are more needed because they're not crowding out other types of investments, and there is this is the time to do them. Now, is the current business financing environment helping, conducive to these investments? Well, clearly not, because there's not enough of them. So let me touch on two things related to the obstacles and barriers. And one is financing. I mean, long-term investments require a special kind of financing, and traditionally the maturity transformer leading to funding of such investments were the banks. And let me say here that I'm very worried about some aspects of bank regulations that could lead to impotence of banks of being able to channel savings into long-term investments. Banks must be well capitalized, but at the same time, if we try to match maturity of assets and liabilities in the banking sector, then the banks stop being banks. I mean, this is what they are for. They're they are for translating short-term savings into long-term investments, and that capacity must be held. We have central banks to make sure that that liquidity crises do not happen in the banking sector. Now, the second liquidity transformer are the governments. I mean, states are eternal. They have a infinite in time at least, cash flow of taxes over time, and naturally they've been an intermediator providing financing for an equity involvement in long-term projects. Now, capacity for that funding from the side of the governments now is limited, as Jeroen has been saying, because of budget constraint, because of high debt. And this is something that the governments cannot do very well. One way out of that problem is restructuring national budgets. And I mean, Poland has been trying to do that. We've been running public investment spending to GDP at around 4%, up to 6% at one stage throughout the last 7 years, but we can't do it alone. I mean, there is a limit of how much Poland can be changing the European Union. And that leaves capital markets as a source of long-term funding. And all the changes that have been discussed here in this conference are of course needed and necessary. But there are some obstacles that I fear might be problematic, especially with respect to the involvement in long-term infrastructure investments, because non-bank investors are usually more eager to invest in such projects when they are half ready. When they're operational, then yes. This is a room for this post-construction phase of projects with stable cash flows and some regulatory safety. It's easy to attract private equity investors in such projects. Not before, not when they are greenfield. Now the problem, I believe, in the main problem with funding of investments, long-term investments, is lack of equity, because it's not a question of funding per se, and this comes from our own banks and discussions with the banking sector. It is the equity, lack of equity, which makes the project non-bankable, and especially in this critical construction phase. So in order to unlock these investments, we have to have a way to inject equity and to attract equity into such projects. Now, the problem with private, or only private involvement in infrastructure projects is that, first of all, some of them have inherent externalities involved. And looking at just direct profitability, cash flow analysis of a, say, transport infrastructure or especially social infrastructure will never yield optimal results. Why? Because the benefit for Europe of many of these projects comes not exactly from the direct cash flow, but from the changed business environment for everyone else. And this is very difficult to be translated into direct cash flow and attract enough private involvement. The second problem is information asymmetry, and we welcome very much the European Commission's initiative to create a central portal of prospective investment projects in member states, which should help to channel private money into such projects. Then there's a question of risk-taking. I was mentioning this a second ago. Brownfield investments are okay, greenfield not so much, because regulations might change, because the risk of the business, which is higher in such projects involved, might deter private sector involvement. Now, as you might know, in September I've been proposing a solution that addresses at least some of these problems, and that is a European Fund for Investments that involves capital injections by member states, and creating a fund which is then able to take on its own debt and does leverage equity investments in Europe. Now, why is it why I believe this could be a solution to the shortage of long-term investments in Europe. First of all, direct budgetary costs of such a solution are very, very small, less than 0.05% of GDP when you're talking about, 2 times higher than 300 billion fund. Secondly, by being pan-European, it removes fragmentation, liquidity obstacle for private sector involvement. That you have in one place, that there's a one-stop shop if anyone is interested in funding such investments. As a result, funding is cheaper, and there's a deeper, more diverse private investment involvement base, both on debt and equity side, because that's also necessary. And then the equity involvement, which I believe is crucial, because it's easier to borrow money. It's more difficult to take on the risk in these projects. That will remove some of the problems with risk aversion, attract more private involvement, and also solve the natural problem of externalities in long-term infrastructure investments. And by locking in the private sector, public sector, it removes also some risks related to regulation uncertainties. Now, and finally, it does also, a pan-European fund or pan-European project does also allow for deepening of the European Union's single market. Because right now we already are watching some projects which are definitely profitable and positive, but they break in cozy local oligopolies or local monopolies, and as such are not supported by member states alone. They will be beneficial for consumers and business in European Union, but might be damaging for inherent small business groups, but important within member states. So that's also a way to make EU as a whole more dynamic, more competitive, looking forward. So let me end here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mateusz, also for, again, reconsidering your plan and putting it in a broader context. Now, I'd like to open the floor. We have some time left, not much, because our panel members have to leave in about 20 minutes. So I'd like to collect some questions, maybe in a group, so that I can give the floor back to our panelists to comment on questions. Who would like to raise questions? Let me ask you, please, to make your points very quickly and also introduce yourself. So who would like to put issues to the panel? Please.
Thank you. My name is Dominique de Créancourt. I am handling the European Association of Long-Term Investors. And I would have liked to ask the very distinguished panel, after this excellent presentation, what they think about the missing word in the title of this seminar. And I mean sustainability before growth. I think that it's relatively easy to promote growth very quickly, and employment as well. And Keynes has already invented the system. You dig holes and you fill them back again. And that promotes growth very fast, and that promotes employment very fast. If sustainability is not in the word, are we not reproducing the conditions sooner or later of the crisis? And if we want sustainability to be in the word, how do we achieve that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a fundamental issue to be tackled here. Any other requests for the floor? Please.
Just to ask Mr. Zurek about his proposal of an European fund for investment. How do you see the difference between that and the European Investment Bank?
Thank you for the very precise question. Someone else? Yes, please.
Yeah. Raoul Rubrel from Open Europe. I just wanted to ask the national ministers the question of who would supervise a European capital market. It came up in the earlier sessions, and I'd particularly like to get the national take on who they believe would be the right supervisor and how that would be structured.
Okay, let me take another question, and then I'll go back. Yes, down there. Yeah.
It's me? Yeah.
Hello there. Simon Marks from Market News International. Just a question for Mr. Dijsselbloem and the Minister Michel Sapin. You both, I think, alluded to the fact that Germany needs to be doing quite a bit more to help Europe get back on track and increase public spending. I was just wondering, I mean, this theme has been going on for a little while. I mean, what are your views? Do you see this? Do you see Germany as having more appetite now? Is this going to happen, do you think, or is it a losing battle? Thank you.
Thank you. That makes 4 questions for 4 panelists. I think we're even. Who would like to respond first? Matthäus, would you like to go first?
Just very quickly, I mean, sustainability, of course, is crucial, which is why no one here is proposing digging holes or even dropping money out of helicopters. We're talking about, first of all, plumbing the system in a way that allows or helps the private sector to invest more via structural reforms or financing market changes. And secondly, if we are to do something with public money, that needs to be done in a way that promotes long-term growth potential of Europe. And from that point of view, vetting of the actual projects is absolutely crucial. So that's my take on this. Regarding the difference between European Investment Bank and the fund, well, it could very well be that the fund would be run by European Investment Bank. The thing is that most of the European Investment Bank financing comes via credit, and if there is and the problem with loan financing of investment projects, especially long-term investment projects, is that you have to have someone interested and capable of taking on that money. And so the one big difference is that it would involve equity involvement of such a fund in the projects. Thank you.
Let's keep on this line, Euro.
Right, thanks. On the sustainability, I very much agree. I think, in general terms, everyone would agree. The question is, of course, what is sustainable? Now, I think a very sensible and healthy way to make sure that investments are sustainable is by putting the risks there where the investor can assess them and can value them and give them a fair price. So one of the things that we shouldn't do anymore in the future is give off public guarantees, implicit or explicit, to the banks or to other investors. I think that if we make sure that the risks are addressed by those who can assess them and can price them realistically, that is the best way to make sure that we do the right investments. So I'm a little hesitant whenever people say, in order to get more investment, we need more government guarantees. That is usually a recipe to introduce the wrong kind of investments. So that's one way to achieve sustainable investment policies. The second question was about who's the supervisor for the Capital Markets Union. I would say that it's crucial to have, if you really want to have a Capital Markets Union, you need a European supervisor. I don't have any fixed thoughts on who should be the supervisor, but I think the first steps would be to start building a single rule book. Work on European legislation that actually creates a single market, capital markets union. And in the final stage, you need a European supervisor. And I don't have any fixed thoughts, so I'm open to all your suggestions. Finally, on Germany, yes, I do think that it is feasible that Germany would invest more. I think there are, if you look at the long-term investment levels in Germany, there is every reason to upgrade the level of investments, public and private, but certainly also public, for example, in infrastructure, but also in education. And I think that there is some openness in Berlin to this issue. That's the optimist in me speaking.
on that. Roberto?
Thank you. I'm very glad to hear Jerome about the single rule book on capital market union. We support that, and we think the supervisors has to be ESMA. We have it, we have to reinforce it, give it the proper means, and go in the direction of the really comprehensive capital market union. About sustainability, and also the issue which was raised about the role of the public part in this investment strategy, I think the two things are connected. Here, nobody is talking either of a big traditional public money investment plan, because I agree we don't have such resources, even if we should better use our macroeconomic imbalance procedure tool in order to ask to everybody to respect the rules, because one of the rules also is that should not to be in commercial surplus too much, and this is one of the rules that also should be fully respected, and we probably have to strengthen our regulatory framework in order to make more binding also those rules. But beyond that, I fully agree with Mateusz. What we are talking about, I fully agree with him, is a different role for the public money. We can really, with a very limited but targeted amount of public resources, which, by the way, somewhere we know are available for that and not fully used, we could, by a proper vehicle, I think that we could have something which is not exactly the EIB, but can be managed by the EIB, to be greater mechanism of properly leveraging some small amount of resources of your money and fully attracting capital, private capitals toward viable projects, which should be aimed of pursuing the goals of EU 2020 strategy, including, first of all, sustainability, which is environmental sustainability, social sustainability. This is exactly this one of the role in channeling to in the right direction, not with such a huge amount of money, but contributing to identify the proper project which has a special externality, and sustainability is part of these externalities, and leveraging private money to that direction. When I speak to the industry, to the market operators, the big private asset manager, I don't hear nobody saying, no, if you do the public part, then you send away the capital. No, they say we need a public part, because we want to contribute stronger, and we need this element of guarantee. And the public guarantee is made of different things. It's made of the European nature of the project, which gives a guarantee that the project will have a redditivity in the long term, will be there, will not be blocked, will be part of the European framework, and the guarantee also of a part of injection of equity, leveraging some limited EU resources. So I think that also the EU investment plan, the Juncker plan, I hope we will make the first step in that direction. And we should not forget that more ambitious picture that also very appropriately our Polish finance minister proposed to us, which goes also in the direction of our reflection and vision as a political group in the European Parliament.
Thank you, Michel. Un dernier mot.
Merci. Oui, je repars de la durabilité parce qu'au fond, c'est le sujet d'aujourd'hui. Nous ne sommes pas dans la même situation qu'en 2008-2009, où il fallait, j'allais mettre du bois pour qu'il y ait du feu et qu'il y ait un peu de réchauffement en termes de croissance. Nous ne sommes pas dans la même situation. Il faut faire très attention. Il faut sortir de ce tunnel de faible croissance, faible inflation. Mais il faut le faire en portant des projets qui soient des projets durables, qui agissent dans la durée et qui nous permettent, c'est tout l'intérêt de l'investissement, de réconcilier la fameuse politique de la demande avec la fameuse politique de l'offre, de l'activité immédiatement pour des projets structurants et qui portent la croissance dans le moyen et dans le long terme. Et c'est là où, évidemment, il faut savoir équilibrer dans de bonnes conditions l'investissement privé qui doit se mobiliser et l'investissement public qui peut être une forme de garantie et une sécurité. J'en viens d'ailleurs très naturellement à la Banque européenne d'investissement. Beaucoup de choses a été dit. La Banque européenne d'investissement, on pense à elle immédiatement parce que c'est sur elle que la Commission, le Conseil s'est appuyé en 2012 pour essayer de lancer un programme d'investissement avec 10 milliards de capital supplémentaire, donc 10 multiplié par 10, c'est grosso modo l'effet de levier, 100 milliards d'investissements potentiels. Ça a été un peu lent, pour dire les choses. On commence à en voir les effets dans nos pays, mais ça a été un peu lent. Là, il faut aller beaucoup plus vite. Donc, si on veut s'appuyer sur la BEI, et c'est une bonne idée, il faut aussi modifier un certain nombre de choses, qu'il s'agisse de sa capacité d'investissement, qu'il s'agisse du niveau de risque qu'elle accepte de prendre, ou bien qu'il s'agisse, à côté d'elle, et en collaboration avec elle, de la mobilisation d'un nouvel outil qui pourrait éventuellement venir à l'appui de ces investissements. Je ne parle pas de la supervision dans le domaine du marché unique des capitaux, car tout a été dit, et je suis d'accord, il faudra un superviseur, il faut trouver le meilleur, je ne sais pas si c'est celui que tu proposes ou un autre, mais le meilleur et le plus rapidement possible. C'est un des sujets dont nous aurons à parler, bien sûr, avec le nouveau commissaire sur ces questions-là, et qui peut apporter énormément. Enfin, je termine par l'Allemagne, parce que Jérôme a été d'une très grande prudence, je ne sais pas pourquoi, mais il a eu raison d'être prudent, parce qu'il faut toujours parler avec l'Allemagne en termes prudents, mais je crois qu'on peut être optimiste. Objectivement, je crois qu'on peut être optimiste. J'ai beaucoup travaillé ces derniers temps à faire en sorte que la France et l'Allemagne fassent des propositions à l'ensemble de nos collègues, à la Commission, autour de cette question de l'investissement. Nous l'avons fait d'ailleurs à 4, les ministres de l'économie, les ministres des finances, et je sens que les esprits mûrissent. Je vous disais en commençant, l'investissement public est resté le même, à un assez haut niveau, en Europe. Ce n'est pas vrai en Allemagne. En Allemagne, l'investissement public a considérablement diminué. C'est d'ailleurs un sujet d'observation et de débat en Allemagne qui est réel. Ce n'est pas un sujet caché, c'est un sujet qui est abordé et qui est débattu publiquement en Allemagne. Et je pense que les choses évoluent. Alors vous savez, on a l'habitude de dire, la première partie de ma proposition sera évidemment fausse, mais on a l'habitude de dire que la France dit toujours « je vais bouger » et ne bouge pas. C'est bien sûr la partie qui est devenue fausse. La France dit « je vais bouger » et elle bouge. Et on a l'habitude de dire que l'Allemagne dit toujours « je ne bouge pas, mais bouge ». Je crois que l'Allemagne est en train de répondre présent à la deuxième partie de mon aphorisme, mais la France est en train de démentir la première partie de mon aphorisme.
Merci, Michel. I think we have time for 2 additional questions if they're very pressing. Yes, the lady in the back, please.
Hi, Gabrielle Steinhauser from the Wall Street Journal. We've just heard that you believe you have a good diagnosis of what is happening in Europe. There's low inflation, there's low growth, there's too little investment. But what you haven't really said is, like, how do we get there? You don't want guarantees, you don't want to spend any extra money. Maybe Germany should spend a little bit more, but that's not really going to change it. Maybe the EIB can do something. Can you be a little bit more concrete on what could actually be done? Are you open to changing your insolvency laws to have more harmonization there? Are you open to having a common information regime on SME credits? I mean, how much sovereignty are you willing to give up on these issues that are so central to this capital markets union that nobody really knows what it is? Thank you.
Thank you. That was very, very direct. One final question. Yes, down there. I can only see your hand, so.
So I didn't realize.
Yeah, the gentleman.
Thanks, thank you. We're talking about capital markets union, but the interesting thing is that capital markets are global and highly liquid and highly mobile. So how does this fit into a global capital market and the concept of Europe being part of a much bigger community? So I know we want to attract investment into Europe, but we also need to somehow align our rules with international standards. So how would that fit in? Thank you.
Thank you. 2 very important questions. I'd like to close the questions here and ask if any of our panel members would like to take those points on. Jeroen?
Thanks. I'd certainly like to react to the first question, which was very direct, as you said, because I think that you already gave a number of very concrete examples of the things that we have to do to create this capital markets union, which is about, when I say single rule book, it's actually about creating one European insolvency law regime. And if that requires giving up national discretion, etc., national legislation, then fine, we should get that done. And the same goes for having a centralized system of information on SME loans. I think that's crucial to create that market that we so badly need in parallel to the banking lending system. But I think that the agenda for Europe should also be broader. It should look at the services markets where I think additional growth can be created. The OECD, where Pierre Carlo worked for so many years, always tells us that if we get some of these reforms done, some at European level and some at national level, differentiating between situations in countries, there is additional growth of, let's say, 6% additional in 10 years' time on top of the kind of moderate levels that we are stuck at now. So let's get these things done. Let's build on a reform agenda which, for a part, is jointly European, bringing back investments in Europe, and for a part is very national. But the sense of urgency has to become a lot stronger. And politicians are always open for the easy routes, which is about spending money and creating more possibilities for the EIB, and a very accommodative monetary stance. All of these are for politicians the easy routes, but politicians also have to shape up and get some of the tougher things done to really create an investment climate in Europe, which we so badly need. And I think that's the only way forward.
Thank you, Jeroen. Also on behalf of the OECD, anybody else would like to take?
I think the question from the Wall Street Journal was not addressed to the European Parliament, but to member states, because the European Parliament, as I said in my first intervention, wants to do those things, wants to, an ambitious capital market union, is ready and is pushing for a real sharing of sovereignty in this area. When we asked for the same thing on the banking sector, a lot of people said it was too ambitious, would never happen, and it happened. So I'm confident that also those things, even touching very sensitive elements, you made a reference to the insolvency regimes, which is a very complicated issue, but I think can and should be addressed.
Okay, so thank you very much. Let me thank all our members of the panel and allow me to spend a few minutes to say a few words en lieu de conclusion, not trying to conclude this very interesting event, but just to add, if I may, some personal thoughts. First of all, let me say that I'm very pleased that at least one achievement has been obtained by the Italian presidency. That was when we took office in July, is try to put very strongly on the EU agenda the issue of growth and jobs, and to ask concrete questions: how do we restore growth and make